So I'm Pete. This is Jay.
I'm Shay. Nice to meet everyone.
I'm with Mira. I'm Chief Evangelist. Jay's with Xero, one of our customers, and we're going to do a fireside chat. We're going to try and get 4 parts done, and we're going to start off just learning a little bit about Jay. So, Jay, you grew up in Adelaide, and then you moved to Melbourne.
That's right.
You did uni in Melbourne,
Yeah.
and then eventually you started your own agency, Beyond the Pixels. Mm-hmm. How did you go from sort of university to creating an agency?
So I actually didn't get a job out of university. So instead I ended up taking a year off, but it was not through my own doing or choice, so to speak. And through that I actually did some freelance work for my parents and a few other things. So it was like very early in my career. So I've always loved design. I think my parents actually bought me a scanner and a computer, it'd be about 30 years ago now. And so that got me into it, a Wacom tablet. So kind of art through to design has always been kind of something I've been super passionate about. So I ended up getting a job actually at the AFL, it's the Australian Football League here in Australia, through a friend of mine that I went to uni with, who was an illustrator, Guy Shield. And we worked together for a couple of years in publishing, and that was my first like cutting my teeth real job at a university. And through that, I actually ended up winning some work for the business, the publishing side of the business, doing branding work, which I really enjoyed doing because it meant that you could kind of look across all the customer touch points of a product, as well as moving into some of the digital work early on in their days. So I enjoyed winning the work and doing the kind of business development side of it as much as doing the work itself. So I ended up like taking a leap and starting a very small business, which was just myself and then some friends from university called Beyond the Pixels.
Yeah, awesome. And then after that, you moved over to New York with Wall Street Journal, and then finally to Amsterdam before circling back down to Melbourne. And so in Amsterdam at Booking.com, you moved over as their first sort of executive in design, and then you moved over to lead product. Do you want to take us through that jump from design to product?
Sure. I mean, it felt like a natural thing, but maybe taking a step back. So when I joined Booking.com, yes, I was their first VP of design. The community of designers across the business were very distributed. We had about 400 designers across the company. Quite a large products and tech organization, about 11,000 of the 35,000 at Booking.com at the time. But I also joined a travel company 6 months before a global pandemic. So it was a pretty interesting time to be there. The first 6 months of the job were very much, we see businesses down, borders are closing. We don't know if there's going to be a vaccine or when it might come into effect. So all the modeling that your McKinseys and everyone that were doing for us, we saw a path kind of out of it maybe 3 to 4 years down the line. So with business down 90%, they had to look at, what do we do? And so that meant layoffs. So, cut costs. So the first kind of part of my role at Booking was actually laying off 25% of the workforce, which was incredibly difficult. Like I was, we switched over really quickly. Like the tech was amazing. You could just switch over and we went to remote like a lot of businesses did during the pandemic. But it was also like, I was juggling finding out my wife had become pregnant with our first child. And then I was also like sitting on Zoom calls all day, talking to people about like, what does the restructure look like? A lot of not very fun stuff where you're kind of negotiating with what are called like works councils, the equivalent of a union in Australia around Europe, for our employees were kind of had their rights and how we were thinking about a restructure and cutting costs. And that meant, going through this really laborious process of doing that, which was probably the biggest and hardest thing I've done to this date in my career, still looking back, because it dragged out over 12 months. Right. And that was because of all the different kind of labour laws and things that you're negotiating with governments and other things. As a business, I think we knew really clearly what we wanted to do. But some of the kind of guiding principles that come from third parties outside of the business, like governments and other things, make it challenging. And so there were people that even wanted to leave the business that couldn't because we had to offer packages to people first based on tenure and other things. Mm-hmm. So it was like a real reality check for me kind of coming in and doing that when I'd come in to lead design.
Yes.
So that's kind of the first part of the story. Incredibly challenging doing that remotely and trying to do right by all the people that were moving on from the business and relocating them back to their families. There's a lot of expats in Amsterdam too, right? Mm-hmm. It's one of the big tech hubs. So that was hard, incredibly hard. But I also built a lot of strong relationships through doing that across the business. And I got to see a lot of the inner workings of how the business operated, some of the things they'd struggled with in the past, and started to become kind of one of the kind of key people involved in like, what does the future look like? So through that, in parallel, got to work on kind of what is the product vision and leading that process through a really tumultuous time. We'd acquired companies prior to me joining, but like Kayak and OpenTable and other brands that you'd know, to build what we were calling the connected trip. So I was lucky. Like, I think the designer in me always brought forward what's the best customer experience. So leading with that first and foremost, like the business kind of can't argue with that. So a lot of the times when we were going through thinking about what's the future shape of the company, but also what is going to be the best experience, how do we build a connected trip with all the other supply of other products outside of hotels and homes? How do you do that? And you're flying the plane and you're still trying to like plug in all these other things in a really complex technology stack, but at the same time, we knew it was the right thing to do. So it was, one of the things that we really, really believed in as being the future of travel is if you can get flights along with hotels and homes, you can get insurance, you can get ground transportation, you can get all the experiences around it. Then if something fails in one of those things, your flight gets cancelled or your hotel gets whatever cancelled or whatever the things are in your trip break, you could think about what are the things you can kind of do to kind of pull that back together and make it a really good experience. So that's what I got to work on through that. And that kind of led me to ending up taking over what was kind of half a product. It was about 2,000 people.
Wow.
And running our product vision across that customer experience. So the app and the website, which is, I assume a lot of people here have used booking.com, and this is 2 years on since then. So I think what you see a lot with design and product too is that it takes a long time to get stuff into customers' hands. Stuff that we'd visioned 2 years ago still is kind of being released now. So it's kind of nice to see that kind of slowly coming to fruition across the 200 and odd countries and territories that we operated in.
Yeah, we'll come back to that in a little bit of time. In terms of, I just wanted to double down on the dynamics between product and design.
Yep.
When product and design, you got the three amigos, engineering, product design. When product and design are working well together, what works well, and where's like the natural friction? What doesn't work well?
I know we're in the product forum. Actually, how many designers do we have in the room?
I think we kicked them all out. Oh, we did.
Oh, we thought we kicked them all out. Okay, that worked well. How many engineers? Software engineers?
One.
Hello.
Yeah.
There we go.
Up the
Two. Okay, good. And the rest of product? Hands up. Product people. Okay, cool. So I think I start with I really think about design and engineering relationship as being critical to obviously building the software and designing it together. So I often look at like that link and making sure that that's working really, really well, because I think when something's thrown over the fence, like the old school waterfall model, rather than like engineering has a much a voice in designing the end experience as designers do, I think that needs to be working really well. So that's kind of like a fundamental thing for me. And they know all the complexities of the various tech stacks and things as businesses scale and products get larger and scale to kind of larger audiences. And then I think, so that dynamic to get it right is super important. And the other one is obviously the product design relationship and the kind of triad together. And I see like commercially minded product leaders in today's environment probably struggling without some of the kind of customer experience instinct that design brings. And so I think you see the tension that comes from that sometimes. And I think where it works really well is when product can really lean into showing as much as telling. So I think a lot more prototyping, a lot more thinking about not just the metrics of success, because I've obviously done both on the commercial side and the product side too and the design side. So I think as much as you can really lean into the thing that you're shipping and looking at it and caring about that and putting yourself in your customer's shoes and mucking around with the product that you've built even before you shipped it, but the existing product and understanding the pain points there. So I think when you kind of galvanize like the three amigos, so to speak, or the triad, and I think plus data science, but ML now with AI coming in, it becomes like really critical that you kind of get common ground, is the way I describe it, as much as alignment. So it's very much finding that common ground and path forward. And I think where you put commitments and deadlines and things in place, you see people, it either break one way or another. And I think that's where the links start to break typically that I've seen, that you kind of get put in a pressure cooker environment. So I'd go right back to say that the first thing I like to do with those three is make sure you've kind of got a foundational relationship, a trusted relationship first and foremost. So like spend time to get to know your counterparts in product and engineering and design, and think about like what motivates them, so you're not kind of jumping in. And I know everyone always has good intent in these kind of things, but you can get to the fierce debate, and when you're in the pressure cooker, things break.
Yes.
And you need that kind of foundational human connection element to make sure you can get through it together, rather than it becoming a blame game, finger pointing, all the other things.
What's your top tip on how to do that for people in the room that often skip over getting to know each other, right? Like you just get sometimes.
There's so many ways you can do it, and there isn't a silver bullet, but like maybe one possible way, if you're already in the mix, you're already operating, you're not forming a new team, and you're already doing it day to day, is create space to hear everyone's point of view on a topic. So it can be anything. It can be people topics, it can be process related, how you approach a project around a deadline that you've got, how do you work through it, work backwards from it, whatever it might be. It can be arguments you've got around a PRD. So bring a topic into a group. And I think one of the things I learned early on in my career is when as a leader of a team, you need to create the conditions to be able to have people share their point of view and feel comfortable and safe doing so. So start with creating the conditions and like ways you can do it. It's not perfect and it takes time. You have to practice, but effectively you can say, give everyone a minute. Literally, we're going to go around. We're going to talk about this topic. I want to hear your point of view. What's and all? Where is your head at with it? How do you feel about it? What do you think about it? Some ideas of ways through it, or whatever you're trying to get to from a decision point of view. But do that. Give everyone uninterrupted minute. And it feels like not a long time, but let's say you've got eight people doing that. Everyone gets exactly the same condition, exactly the same space, rather than me. There's always three people that talk up and they're a bit louder than the other, and then you point to the more silent person. You say, hey, I want to hear your point of view. You've already created the wrong condition in that environment. So I think creating the space for people to get that kind of point of view out, I think what you'll also find is you can create that dynamic and create that trust environment for a team. Then you kind of unlock a lot of innovation too. Because innovation comes from diversity of not just like the kind of the status quo kind of diversity, but like, points of view diversity and experience diversity. So that's where I've already found you never know what you're going to get from that conversation. You really don't. You go into it eyes wide open, create the space. You can get down to almost 30 seconds, and that's 6 minutes, right? For 12 people in a meeting, and that's nothing when you think about how many more meetings you might have to try and get alignment. Otherwise,
and if somebody stays quiet for months and then tells
you, or you get people slacking each other on the side on the meeting, during the meeting or after the meeting. Like, you've all seen it and felt it, I'm sure. So create the conditions as much as you can to do that.
Awesome. Let's move to part two. So in my role at Miro, I travel the world and get to speak to our largest customers, and I'm seeing more recently everything is changing, particularly product and design and engineering teams. What they're building is changing, how the teams are building it is changing, and now who they're building it for. Agentic commerce is changing. Absolutely. What's that happening like at Xero?
It's fast, right? And I think people are afraid of what it means for them in their role, or it can mean so many different things to so many different people. But I think what I've learned more recently is the more you kind of lean into it, the less kind of doubt creeps into my own mind, and the better sleeps that I have at night. And I think there's a few things. One, it's like, we know it's a very powerful tool. I'm thinking about it through like workflow, like what's the workflow of a designer of the future and a PM and an engineer, not just from efficiency and kind of operating expense point of view, because that's like that's a business metric for sure, and it's important, but like, what is the end-to-end workflow going to look like? And then the career framework and the capabilities and skills that you need for that job, I think it's changing weekly, honestly. So when I go to hire, a job description is going to be changing weekly, almost, is the way I'm thinking about it, as we go and recruit from different businesses to bring in certain types of talent. So all of these things kind of ladder up. So I think again, similar thing, create the conditions for like experimentation, ideas to thrive in that environment. And that, there's lots of mechanics you can put around that, to like from virtual teams and other things, but also just through procurement in a large organization to unblock people to access tools to innovate and muck around with and see what comes of it, and create the space and the kind of okay to fail culture around that. So it's a really interesting time, like what I'm seeing even from my teams with what they're doing with Figma, Miro, and plenty of other tools like Vercel and other things, and prototyping, and it's amazing. So it's like and then the more you lean into it, it becomes more exciting versus more of a kind of daunting. Because keeping up with it, like you can listen to every podcast, you can follow LinkedIn, but you'll never keep up. It's so fast, it's moving so quickly.
Yeah, and I'm seeing some people letting people go, but it's almost the opposite. Just because you can do things faster, that's great. You actually need to do 10 times as much. Your competitors are, particularly the AI native ones, are shipping a lot. So, like by the end of 2025, what are you thinking jobs are looking like, and how are you taking your team through the journey of this change for people that have been working for you for a while?
It's still early days, but like I said before, it's kind of unblocking them so that they can actually start using all the really cool stuff that's coming into fruition. Empowering them to play around with it, and then figuring out ways to kind of surface that, so ideas can then come from anywhere. It's not a 20% innovation thing like Google did back in the day or whatever it might be, but it's very much like start bringing it into your daily workflow and see what you get out of it. And some people are really leaning into it and experimenting with it. So it's very much that at the moment. Some of the goals that we're thinking about, I'm right in kind of goal setting moment time. Tomorrow, I think I start signing off on people's goals. But one of the things that we're looking at as a shared goal for design is moving from, and just I think people are doing this in the industry a bit anyway, but like moving to very much like everything is a prototype rather than having 1,000 Figma files out there. Let's move to like, what is it? Like there's a clickable prototype. And the reason I say that is it's accessible to everyone. So we often spend a lot of time going up the chain, putting Figma mocks or building prototypes or putting those mocks into PowerPoint presentations like, Google Slides, Google Docs, other things to get kind of sponsorship approval or visibility for the C-suite or whatever it might be, or the board. But a link to something that's in a browser is accessible to engineering to go and build something that is scalable into our tech stacks. It's accessible to the entire C-suite. It's accessible to test with our customers. So it permeates, and it's accessible for our sales team to demo stuff to customers. So like it's just a really powerful thing, and it's real. You can play around with it, and it's the thing that's going to be kind of live in your product one day. Then it creates a kind of, so that's where we're kind of starting to head.
Okay.
It's going to be messy and clunky and all the things in between, but we're here to kind of have everyone's back and make sure that they can figure out what the future looks like. So I don't know what the end looks like of 2025, but I'm sure our jobs are going to be a bit different.
Yeah. And so when you think about the future at Miro, the Miro that everyone here uses is a Miro that I had a year ago, and I'm seeing 18 months beyond that in terms of what our product teams are doing. When you were at Wall Street Journal, you were lucky enough to be able to go to some of the Apple kind of pre-launches. You're talking to me about going to see the Apple Watch 12 months before anyone knew it even existed. Can you take us through that journey of seeing product early, and how people can, particularly if you're in Australia or you're not maybe aware of what some of these larger organizations are doing, how do you get those early signals?
It's a great one. I think you can't underestimate the importance of what the large players have had an impact on in hardware and software and the operating systems that they've created, whether it's Google and Apple, but also Meta and OpenAI now. So I was very fortunate to be able to go to Cupertino a number of times as one of like 3 kind of designers in news between us, the Washington Post and New York Times, and see Apple products, hardware that didn't make it into consumers' hands, but they wanted us because they wanted to know what news could look like or market data could look like with new haptic devices, new interfaces like the Apple Watch. It's a tiny little screen. Like, what could news and market data look like on that for society as they kind of are experimenting with stuff. So yeah, it was like a year or two before the Apple Watch. It was an amazing experience. Like, and to be thrown in a room and locked in, literally, like I had to sign everything you can imagine.
We're allowed to talk about it now.
Yeah, so it was a fun time. But yeah, the impact that those large players have on the hardware and software that they build, really impacts people's lives. So you've got a duty of care somewhat to think about how you do this stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Now, in Miro, when people use AI, they're creating content, and it's on Miro. It's generally like a work in progress.
Yeah.
It can be a bit messy. I'm sure people have messy Miro boards here. At Xero, though,
Are you upset about that?
No, not at all. I think messy work chaos, as Figma spoke about at the beginning. As you move to like in Xero, you're working with data, right? And people are asking your AI, you're designing tools that are trust. A little bit different to how Miro needs to design our AI products. How are you thinking about using AI in Xero from a design perspective?
Miro's AI, or more like Xero collaboration and
like Ask Jax, or how you're bringing AI into the product.
Yeah. So I would start with, like, Xero still has lots of accountants in the business, so you can think about, there's a lot of domain knowledge, so you don't go and create an ivory tower of AI people over here. You need them for building the models. But there's also a lot of institutional knowledge about how our ledger works, all the different parts of our product, from payroll to payments to accounting. I think of this as a big calculator. Therefore, you kind of need to think about the use cases and where they come from. And when we've started looking at kind of where we can create kind of more automation and efficiency for small businesses or accountants and bookkeepers, we're thinking about their workflows. So we've done tons of research in those spaces for a really long time. And sitting with them every day and watching them do things, or they talk to our customer service team, and then we can kind of log in on their behalf and get them unstuck. And you see kind of where the pain points and things are in kind of workflows that people are using in the software every day. So it's starting with that, and then it's talking to people out in the real world, and then it's bringing that in internally, and not thinking that there's a central AI team that's going to go and come up with all these new use cases, but getting the use cases out of the kind of domain and institutional knowledge. So if you think we're, a bit over 200 product teams, it's like there's not one product team that's coming up with all the AI ideas. It has to come collectively. And then there's obviously kind of metrics of success, but there's, all the trade-offs that you'd make around time to market and complexity and all the things around that allows us to kind of think about how you prioritize those different use cases.
Okay. So like double clicking on that sort of part of part 3 around, what does it take to truly innovate together across design, product and engineering?
Yeah.
Are there any practices that you've learned that you could share with the team around innovating across design, product and engineering?
It's also a really good question. I think, again, I come back to it, and it sounds super corny, but it's like, it is really built on trust. I think the larger the organization, the more you have to work on the kind of the foundations of trust in teams that are coming up with these ideas and figuring out how you get breakthroughs. And I think being okay that like ideas can come from anywhere. And I think the larger organizations get the somewhat more, again, political is a bad word, but like political they somewhat become. So people tie their jobs to like feeling like they need credit for an idea or whatever it might be. So I think everyone has to kind of be okay with ideas coming from anywhere, and then figuring out how you build them together, because that's being part of like one company versus it being about just the engineering team or just a designer on the design team. And so I think that it is just such an important way to think about it. Like it's part of kind of how we think in our values, and like Xero first, and then you're thinking about that. And again, it sounds a bit corny, but like if you can kind of reflect on that and you can build it into the culture, you can build it into how you get kind of calibrated through performance and all the other things that is tied to incentive structures in businesses. So those things become really powerful as ways to kind of drive innovation through cultural kind of mechanisms. So I know that's a bit of a fluffy answer, but it's somewhat being okay with it, and particularly now, I think everyone's probably like uncertain about what their job looks like, including myself. So it's you need to be okay with the kind of uncertainty and somewhat comfortable with like almost different truths kind of coming and ideas coming from anywhere, and helping kind of unblock that and figuring out ways to kind of make it successful.
Okay. And as you sort of, you moved from Wall Street Journal over to Booking.com, then back to Xero, you just sort of know a bit of a look. Is there any non-negotiables that you've, picked up along the way that when you came to Xero, or, if you were to go somewhere else, that it's sort of like a, something that teams have to do?
I hate when people are being dragged down by kind of toxic, negative behavior or energy from people. And so, it's something that like, if you're spending all of your energy on like one or two people in a team and they're dragging everyone else down, like you should be spending all your energy on the people that really want to be there and really want to pull things forward.
Yes.
And so that's where I think about, like, it's an energy question for me. Like, am I spending all my energy on the right people?
Yes.
That really want to pull this thing forward. And you give people a shot and you go back and forward a few times. And then it's very much that conversation. It's like, okay, right, let's keep going. Like, we've got to keep going. We're going to keep pushing on. I'm going to put all my energy into the people that are really bought into this and passionate about it and want to show up every day and enjoy it. And then create a really good environment for it. And again, like, we're helping small businesses, but we're not in the medical profession curing cancer. We're not like, it's a job. At the end of the day, I'm lucky I get to do what I do, but that's like, bring that kind of sense of like reality in is something I like to do as much as I can to kind of ground people and feel okay about, some of the things that might feel outsized in terms of importance, that might, when you pull it back, it's probably not.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. We all work with difficult stakeholders, so giving yourself permission to work with people that are easy to work with.
Definitely.
Okay. So you're most senior person in design at Xero. How are you making sure that design at an executive level is strategic and not just pixel pushing?
Yeah. It's one of my favorite things to do. And it's not talk about design. That's the first
number
thing.
one. Okay.
It's very much show, not tell.
Yeah.
So I think luckily coming in as the most senior person, that helps, right?
Yep.
And I was brought in because I'd also run product too. And so I was lucky to join a new leadership team who are all ex-Silicon Valley now, and have experience in that space. So like in a way, kind of, I inherited some trust through that. So at Xero, it was kind of somewhat inherited, but I then, still needed 12 months to prove myself and my worth, so to speak. So I think a lot of it is like looking at kind of where the maturity of the organization is, of design, and how it fits into product development as a whole. And, I showed that to our C-suite and our CEO, Sukhinder, and others on the board, and said, this is the journey I think we're on over the next 1, 2, 3 years, and kind of the things that I'm going to look at up-leveling across people, process, and the product experience. And I think we've made really good strides. So like that's kind of somewhat been unlocked with kind of a bit more investment in design and research and other things too. So somewhat proofs in the pudding. But the other things that I like to do beyond not talking about design specifically is very much the show, not tell. Like it's design superpowers. Like you can render kind of what the future looks like, and it's like it's the most powerful thing. You have to be very careful with it, right? Because you can piss everyone off too. There's been times where earlier in my career I've taken prototypes or whatever to the board for innovation days because I couldn't get something through the kind of cogs of the machine of the business, and then and that just set off fires everywhere and no one liked me. So not that was my entire ambition was to remain liked, but earlier in my career that didn't do me any justice. So I think you somewhat have to be careful, but you wield a lot of power through that. And then you're not talking about design, you're talking about the experience you're providing for customers in the future and showing people what it could be. And then I think always the hardest thing is the how, what's the path to get there, and helping people kind of walk that path, and be okay with like somewhat two things existing at the same time. Like at Booking, like we would run 1,000 experiments a day on our product, on our funnel. Now I had no idea what anyone was doing when I joined. Like, and we brought in consultants for Accenture, spent millions and millions of dollars to figure out kind of all the stuff that was going on. But when you're running 1,000 experiments a day, they just come back at the end and they were like, we don't know what anyone's doing either. Like, it was ridiculous. And so you kind of, there's a level of comfort that like, yes, conversion was going up and not too many inbound calls to our customer service team. So like the metrics were somewhat stable. But at the same time, I was like, so short-term optimization. And I really cared about what is the vision of the future product going to look like and how do you get there? And I realized like through 12 months of like beating kind of a dead horse type approach, like I couldn't get there through just doing that. I also had to like run experiments as well to kind of start unlocking what could mid and long-term thinking look like. And that became successful. Like, but if I'd just gone in with my same mindset of like, I was naturally, one of my strengths is the vision side of it. Like even if it's 2 or 3 years out, not 10, but I had to look at like a week out. What could we move and how much revenue could we drive from that in the funnel? So I started doing both together, and I got comfortable with doing both together. And I think it's something that I've learned and brought into Xero as well, is that you can make trade-offs in the short term and do things that maybe go against the vision. That's okay. What do you learn from it? How does it change the vision? That's okay. So being okay with both somewhat was one of the things that I kind of brought through.
Awesome. Okay, well, we are out of time, so that's going to draw us to a conclusion. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend time with us.
Thanks for listening. Yep.